I buried my husband with my own hands. No one came, not even my children. But when I went back to his grave the next morning, what I saw made my blood turn to ice. The cold wind that morning felt heavier than usual. The sky was gray, and a thin mist crawled between the tombstones as if it didn't want to leave. My hands trembled as I placed the last white rose on my husband's grave. The grave looked fresh, the soil still dark and moist, and the scent of rain mixed with earth filled the air. I stood there alone. Completely alone. I thought maybe one of my children would change their mind and show up. Maybe they'd come running down the churchyard saying, "Sorry, Mom. We couldn't let you do this alone." But no one came. No phone call. No message. Just silence. As I whispered my final goodbye, I noticed something strange. The wind suddenly stopped blowing. The air turned cold, too cold, and I could swear I heard a soft whisper behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned around, and that's when I saw it. Something small, shiny, and unfamiliar was lying right on top of the grave, something that wasn't there before. I bent down to pick it up, but the moment my fingers touched it, my heart skipped a beat. My husband's name was carved on it, and below it, a date, tomorrow's date. My knees weakened. I looked around quickly, but no one was there. The cemetery was empty, silent. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I clutched the object tightly in my hand and whispered, "What is this, Richard?" My husband's name echoed in my mind like a warning. That's when I felt a shadow move behind me. And that's where everything began. The day before the funeral had been chaos. My husband, Richard, had been sick for a long time, heart problems, the doctors said. He was a strong man once, the kind who fixed everything in the house and laughed so loud that the neighbors could hear. But life had a cruel way of taking his strength little by little. I was the one who took care of him till the very end. Feeding him, giving him his medicine, staying awake every night when he couldn't breathe. Our children, however, had other lives. Emily, my oldest, was too busy with her new job in the city. Mark, my second, cared more about parties and his friends. And little Lily, well, she was grown now too, with her own family. They all said the same thing whenever I asked them to visit. "Mom, I'll come next weekend." But that next weekend never came. When Richard died, I called them one by one. My voice shook as I told them the news. Emily cried for a few seconds and said she couldn't get off work. Mark said he'd try but didn't promise. Lily just said, "Oh, Mom, I didn't think it would happen so soon." They all promised to call back. They never did. The morning of the funeral, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee, put on the black dress I'd ironed the night before, and looked at the framed photo of our wedding on the table. In that picture, Richard was young, strong, and smiling. I whispered to it, "It's time to rest, my love." When I arrived at the church, the pews were empty. The priest looked at me sadly. "Will your family be joining Mrs. Grant?" he asked softly. I smiled weakly. They said they would. Maybe they're just running late. But they never came. The service went on with just me, the priest, and two gravediggers who barely spoke. As I watched the coffin lower into the ground, I felt a piece of my heart go down with it. After the funeral, I didn't go home right away. I stayed by the grave, staring at it as the clouds darkened. That was when I saw something in the distance. My son Mark's car speeding past the cemetery road. Loud music blasting from the speakers. For a second, I thought he'd stop. But he didn't. I saw a group of people in his car laughing, holding drinks. My eyes filled with tears. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. I sat in the living room with the light on, clutching Richard's old watch. It had stopped ticking the moment he passed. Around midnight, I heard a sound, a faint thud from outside. I thought maybe it was just the wind, but the sound came again, louder this time. My heart started racing. I peeked through the window, but the yard was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there. By morning, I decided to visit Richard's grave again. Maybe it was foolish, but I wanted to talk to him. I put on my shawl and walked down the road to the cemetery. The sky was covered in dark clouds again, just like the day before. When I got there, my heart nearly stopped. The soil on the grave was disturbed, as if someone had been digging. And right in the middle of the grave, sitting on top of the turned earth, was that small shiny object, the one with my husband's name and tomorrow's date. I picked it up. It was a golden locket, but one I had never seen before. Inside it was a tiny photo of Richard, smiling, and next to it, a small note folded neatly. I opened it with shaking hands. It read, "Don't let them suffer the same way I did. Tomorrow everything changes." I gasped and looked around, but no one was there. The cold wind blew through my hair, and I could swear I heard Richard's voice whisper my name. Helen. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned sharply toward the sound. Standing near the edge of the cemetery gate was a figure. I couldn't see the face, but I knew that silhouette. The height, the shoulders. It was him. It looked exactly like Richard. The figure slowly lifted a hand and pointed toward me. Or rather, toward something behind me. I turned quickly, and screamed. The soil on the grave was sinking. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so fast I thought it would burst out of my chest. The ground in front of me was sinking slowly, almost breathing. The soil moved like something, or someone, was pushing from underneath. I froze. My fingers clutched the golden locket so tightly that its sharp edge pressed into my palm. No, it can't be. I whispered, my voice trembling. Richard. The ground moved again. This time it was stronger. I screamed and stumbled back until I hit a headstone behind me. For a second, everything went still again. The air turned heavy, the wind stopped, and even the birds that usually perched on the trees were silent. Then nothing. Just the grave, still and quiet, as if mocking me. My body was shaking all over. I turned and ran as fast as my old legs could carry me. My heart screamed for me to stop looking back, but I couldn't help it. When I reached the gate and glanced over my shoulder one last time, I saw the figure again. Tall, still, standing by the grave. He was looking right at me. I hurried home, locked every door and window, and leaned against the wall trying to breathe. My heart wouldn't calm down. The clock ticked loudly in the silence of the house. When I finally caught my breath, I looked down at the locket again. The words inside it repeated in my mind like a curse. Don't let them suffer the same way I did. Tomorrow everything changes. What did that mean? Who wrote it? Was this some kind of cruel prank? Or was Richard trying to tell me something from beyond the grave? I shook my head. No, Helen, you're losing your mind, I said out loud. It's just grief playing tricks on you. But grief doesn't dig graves. That afternoon, I tried to distract myself by cleaning the house. The smell of dust and lemon cleaner filled the air as I wiped the kitchen counter. Every corner of the house reminded me of Richard. The chair he used to sit in, his favorite mug, the worn-out slippers by the door. I caught myself talking to him, as if he could still hear me. Why did you leave me alone, Richard? I whispered as tears fell down my cheeks. Why couldn't they come to say goodbye? Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Emily, my oldest daughter. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe she'd finally remembered her father. I wiped my eyes and answered. Emily, sweetheart. Mom, I just wanted to check if the funeral went well, she said quickly, her voice tired, as if she were in a hurry. I swallowed hard. It was fine, I said softly. But you didn't come, Emily. There was silence on the line. Then she sighed. Mom, I told you I couldn't get away from work. You know how important this job is. More important than your father's final goodbye? I asked, my voice breaking. Mom, please, she said, sounding irritated. I can't argue right now. I just called to check on you. Before I could say another word, she hung up. I stood there staring at the phone, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. Later that evening, Mark sent me a text. Joe, Mom. Hope you're okay. Dad wouldn't want you sad. I'll come visit next week maybe. Next week. Always next week. I didn't reply. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, clutching the locket. The ticking of the clock grew louder and louder, until it felt like it was echoing inside my skull. Somewhere in the house, the wind pushed against the window, making a soft whistling sound. Then I heard it. A voice. Very faint, almost like a whisper. It was coming from the hallway. Helen. My body froze. I turned my head slowly toward the door. The hallway was dark, but I could see a faint light, like candlelight, flickering near the stairs. I sat up, heart pounding. Richard? I whispered, my throat dry. The whisper came again, closer this time. Helen. I grabbed the small flashlight from my bedside drawer and turned it on, pointing it toward the hallway. There was nothing there. But the flickering light was still moving, leading toward the front door. I hesitated for a long moment before following it. My bare feet were cold on the floor. The light seemed to float slowly ahead of me, down the stairs, toward the door. When I reached the living room, I gasped. The door was open. I knew I had locked it earlier. I even remembered checking it twice. But now it stood wide open, the night wind blowing in through the gap. My heart felt like it stopped. I stepped closer, clutching the flashlight. And that's when I saw the muddy footprints. They started from the doorstep and led all the way into the living room. The soil was fresh and damp, just like the cemetery ground. My flashlight shook in my hand as I followed the prints slowly, step by step. They went across the carpet, past the old rocking chair, and stopped right in front of the fireplace. I stared at them, my breath catching in my throat. The last footprint was shaped like a boot I knew too well. Richard's work boots. The same ones he was buried in. The clock struck midnight. The sound echoed through the house, loud and haunting. My flashlight flickered and went out. The room was swallowed in darkness. I could still feel the cold air pressing against my skin. And then, I heard the creaking sound of the rocking chair. It was moving, back and forth, slowly. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached for the light switch, but my hand trembled too much to find it. Then a low whisper came from the chair. You left me there alone. I froze. Tears filled my eyes. No, Richard, please don't do this. The chair creaked again, faster now. The fireplace flickered to life by itself, flames dancing wildly, lighting up the room. And there, in the glow of the fire, I saw it. On the wall above the mantel, written in black soot, were the same words from the locket. Tomorrow everything changes. The flames crackled louder. The locket in my hand grew hot, burning my skin. I dropped it and screamed. The lights flickered, the rocking chair stopped, and everything went silent again. When I looked down, the locket had split open. Inside, the picture of Richard was gone. In its place was a new photo, of my 3 children smiling. And beneath that photo, a line of writing appeared as if carved by an invisible hand. They will understand pain. I staggered back, trembling. What do you mean, Richard? What are you trying to do? No answer. Only the sound of the clock ticking toward 1 o'clock. I dropped to my knees, sobbing, whispering his name. Then I heard a car horn outside. 3 short honks. I crawled to the window and peeked out. A car was parked in front of the house. I squinted through the dark. It was Mark's car. But why was he here in the middle of the night? He stepped out, holding something in his hand. Then I noticed it, mud covering his shoes. The same kind I saw on the floor. My body went cold. He looked up at the house, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. I opened the door and called out, Mark, what are you doing here? He stumbled toward me, shaking. Mom, he whispered. Something's wrong. I grabbed his arms. What is it? He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. Emily and Lily, they're in trouble. My heart stopped. What do you mean, trouble? He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, they saw Dad. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but no words came out. The night air was heavy, and Mark's breath came in shaky bursts. His eyes darted toward the street as if something might follow him. I gripped his arm tighter. Mark, I said in a trembling voice. What do you mean they saw Dad? He looked pale, almost gray. Emily called me an hour ago, he said, swallowing hard. She was crying. She said she saw Dad standing outside her apartment. Just standing there in the rain, looking up at her window. I blinked, my heart hammering. That's not possible, I whispered. Mark shook his head. That's what I told her. I told her she was seeing things, but she kept saying she saw him. He looked angry, Mom. Really angry. A chill crept up my spine. And Lily? Mark's eyes darkened. Lily called me 10 minutes later. She said she was driving home from her friend's house, and something ran into the road. She swore it looked like Dad too. She hit the brakes so hard her car almost crashed. My knees felt weak. I held onto the doorframe to keep from falling. The locket's burned outline still marked my palm. "Mom," Mark said softly, his voice shaking. "What's happening?" I looked out into the dark street again. I don't know," I whispered. "But I think your father is trying to tell us something." We sat in the living room, the only light coming from a small lamp on the side table. Mark's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He kept glancing toward the rocking chair, the same one that had moved by itself earlier. "Mom," he said quietly, "what really happened this morning at the cemetery?" I hesitated. My eyes fell on the fireplace where the message had appeared earlier. It was clean now, as if it had never been there. Still, I could almost see the black words floating in my mind. "Tomorrow, everything changes." I told him everything. About the sinking grave, the figure I saw, the golden locket, the note, and the whisper calling my name. I told him how the locket changed, showing the picture of him and his sisters with that awful message below it. "They will understand pain." When I finished, Mark's face was pale. "That's insane, Mom. Maybe someone's playing a trick on you." "Who would do that?" I asked. "No one knew where I buried him but me and the priest. And you weren't there." He looked down, guilt flashing across his face. "I know," he said quietly. "I should have been there." I reached out and touched his hand. "It's too late to change that now. But maybe we can still make things right." "How?" he asked. Before I could answer, my phone rang. I jumped. The sound was too loud, too sudden. I picked it up. It was Emily. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, something's wrong with the house." "What do you mean, honey?" I asked quickly. "The lights keep flickering," she said, crying. "And the TV turned on by itself. It's showing Dad's old video, the one from the beach trip. I didn't even have that tape anymore. I threw it out years ago." I could hear the sound of waves through the phone, and faintly, Richard's voice laughing. "Emily, listen to me," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Leave the house. Go outside right now." "I can't," she cried. "The front door won't open. It's like it's locked from the outside." I stood up. "Mark, we have to go to her. Now." Mark grabbed his car keys and nodded. The drive to Emily's apartment was silent, except for the sound of the wind rushing past the car. The sky was darker than usual, thick clouds covering the moon. Halfway there, I turned to Mark. "Do you believe me now?" He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom." When we arrived, Emily was standing by the window, crying. The apartment looked the same as before, except for the flickering lights and the faint sound of a man's laughter coming from her TV. "Mom!" she shouted, running into my arms. Her body was cold, like she'd been standing in the rain. "He was here. I saw him again." I held her tight. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're here now." Mark looked around the room. The TV screen flickered, showing old home videos. Richard smiling, holding baby Emily in his arms, then waving at the camera. The tape cut suddenly, and static filled the screen. Then words began to appear in white letters across the black screen. "You buried me alone." Mark turned off the TV immediately, his hands shaking. "What is this?" he whispered. I stared at the dark screen, my heart pounding. "He's angry," I said softly. "He feels forgotten." Emily sobbed. "But I didn't mean to miss the funeral, Mom. I really couldn't leave work." A sudden crash came from the kitchen. We all jumped. Mark rushed to check, and I followed behind him. The cabinet doors were swinging open and shut violently on their own. Plates fell and shattered across the floor. The lights above us blinked rapidly. Then just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Mark bent down to pick up a piece of broken glass, and froze. "Mom," he said slowly, "look." Etched into the wooden floor, as if carved by a knife, were words that made my blood run cold. "The next sunrise will take one." Emily screamed. "What does that mean?" I felt dizzy. "It means," I said quietly, "we don't have much time." That night, we didn't go home. We all stayed at Emily's apartment, too afraid to sleep. Every sound made us jump. Around 3 a.m., I saw something move in the reflection of the window, a shadow passing behind us. But when I turned, no one was there. Emily eventually fell asleep on the couch. Mark sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. I sat beside him, clutching the locket. "Mom," he said suddenly, his voice low. "I think I know what this is about." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Dad told me something before he died. I never told anyone because I didn't want to upset you." My chest tightened. "What did he tell you?" Mark hesitated. He said he didn't want a big funeral. He said he didn't want people crying for him, especially us kids. He said we'd only cry out of guilt, not love. I stared at him, stunned. Why would he say that? Mark looked down. Because he felt we'd forgotten him long before he died. Tears filled my eyes. "That's not true," I whispered. "He knew we loved him." "Did he, Mom?" Mark asked softly. "Did he really?" Before I could answer, the TV flickered on again by itself. This time there was no video, no sound. Just a single image. A sunrise. And below it, the words. "It begins with the one who stayed." The lamp beside us shattered, plunging the room into darkness. Emily screamed, waking up in terror. I held on to both of them, whispering prayers. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The wind howled like a voice. And somewhere in the distance, a church bell began to ring. Even though it wasn't Sunday. Mark looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mom," he whispered. "What if he's not after us? What if he's after you?" The words hit me like ice water. I turned toward the window, and there, through the lightning flash, I saw him again. Richard. Standing in the rain. Staring right at me. His lips moved, forming silent words. "You buried me alone." And then he lifted his hand, pointing straight at me. The lightning flashed again, and his face disappeared into the dark. For a moment, the window reflected only our frightened faces, me, Emily, and Mark, pale, trembling, and frozen in shock. "Mom," Emily whispered, clutching my arm. "He's gone." But I couldn't move. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my whole chest. The rain beat furiously against the window. The wind whistled through the cracks, and the air inside the room grew colder than ever. "No," I whispered, my eyes still on the glass. "He's not gone. He's here." A loud bang came from the front door, making us all jump. It wasn't a knock. It was a slam, like someone had thrown their whole body against it. Mark grabbed a chair, ready to defend us. Another bang. Then another. "Dad," Emily screamed. "Stop it. Please stop. Don't say his name." I cried, but it was too late. The door suddenly burst open. Even though the lock hadn't been touched. Cold air rushed in, blowing out the candles we had lit. The room fell into darkness again. We huddled together, breathing heavily. The door swung back and forth in the wind, creaking slowly. Mark whispered, "Mom, what if he wants you to come back to the grave?" I turned to him, shocked. "What?" He swallowed hard. "Think about it. The locket, the messages, the grave sinking. Maybe he's waiting for you there. Maybe he can't rest because of something you did." Tears welled up in my eyes. All I did was bury him. What else could I have done? But deep down, a painful memory stirred, one I had tried to forget. The night before the funeral, I'd stood in the church, staring at Richard's coffin. The priest had already gone home. I'd been the last one there. I remembered touching his cold hand, whispering, "I forgive you." But I hadn't really meant it. Not then. Richard hadn't always been the gentle husband everyone thought he was. In the early years, yes, he was loving, hardworking, proud. But when the factory closed and money got tight, something in him changed. He became bitter, angry, sometimes cruel. There were nights I'd cry quietly in bed while he drank himself to sleep. Our children heard the shouting but pretended they didn't. They grew up angry at him, angry at us, and eventually, they stopped coming home. When Richard got sick, he apologized over and over for what he'd done. But his words came too late. And maybe, just maybe, when I buried him, part of me still held on to the bitterness I never spoke aloud. Was that why his spirit couldn't rest? Was this my fault? Another crash shook the house, snapping me out of my thoughts. The picture frames fell off the wall one by one, shattering across the floor. Emily screamed again. Mark dragged us both toward the hallway. "Get in the car," he shouted. We rushed outside into the pouring rain. Lightning split the sky, and for a brief moment, I saw him again, Richard, standing by the tree in front of the apartment. His clothes were wet and muddy, just like the day I buried him. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Richard!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer. He just pointed again, this time, toward the direction of the cemetery. Then his voice, low and echoing like it came from the earth itself, whispered, "Come back before sunrise." And just like that he vanished. Mark started the car. "We're going," he said firmly, slamming his foot on the gas. Emily cried quietly in the back seat. The road to the cemetery felt longer than ever. The rain poured harder, lightning flashing every few seconds, lighting up the trees like ghosts. The car wipers struggled to keep up. "Mom," Mark said suddenly, his voice strained. "What did he mean before sunrise?" I clutched the locket in my hand. I think if I don't go, something terrible will happen." "Like what?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. When we reached the cemetery, the iron gates were already open, swaying gently in the wind. The path was muddy, the trees bending with the storm. Lightning flashed again, and the gravestones seemed to glisten like silver in the rain. I stepped out of the car, holding the locket. The wind whipped my shawl around me. "Stay in the car," I told the children. "Mom, no." Emily cried. "You're not going out there alone." "I have to," I said. "This started with me, and it'll end with me." Mark tried to follow, but I gave him a look. The same look I used to give when he was a boy and wouldn't listen. He stopped, his jaw tight, eyes full of fear. I walked slowly toward the grave. The rain soaked through my clothes, but I didn't care. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I reached Richard's grave, I froze. It was open. The ground had caved in completely, forming a deep hollow pit. My heart pounded as I looked down into the dark hole. "Richard," I whispered. The wind stopped. The rain eased. And then his voice. "Helen." I turned around. He was standing there, pale and dripping wet, his face both familiar and strange. His eyes were filled with sadness, not anger. "Why did you bury me alone?" he asked softly. I trembled. "Because no one else came," I said, tears mixing with the rain. "Because our children didn't care anymore. Because I was the only one who still remembered the man you used to be." He shook his head slowly. "No, Helen. You buried me alone because you wanted to. Because you couldn't forgive me." His words pierced through me like knives. "I tried. I cried. You don't know how much I tried." He stepped closer. "You held on to the pain. You let it bury me deeper than the ground ever could." I fell to my knees. "Then tell me what I must do, Richard. Please. Tell me how to make it right." He reached out his hand. "Come closer." I hesitated, then slowly rose and stepped toward him. The moment our hands touched, the cold shot through me like ice water. The grave behind him began to glow faintly, a dull golden light coming from deep within. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "That's where the truth lies." I looked down into the open grave, terrified. "What truth?" Before he could answer, Mark's voice rang out from behind me. "Mom, don't." I turned around and saw both my children running toward me. "Stay back." I shouted, but they didn't stop. Then lightning struck the tree beside the grave, and the ground shook violently. The golden light flared brighter. The locket in my hand snapped open on its own, revealing new words etched inside. "One must return or all will fall." A deafening crack split the sky, and the earth beneath me gave way. I screamed as I lost my footing and fell toward the glowing grave. The wind screamed in my ears as the ground swallowed me whole. The rain, the lightning, my children's terrified cries, all of it vanished in an instant. I fell through darkness, weightless, like being pulled into a deep sleep that had no end. Then suddenly, I landed on something soft. Not soil, not wood, something strange. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a dimly lit tunnel. The air was heavy and cold, smelling of earth and old flowers. Faint golden light shimmered on the walls, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. I sat up, gasping for breath. The locket was still in my hand, glowing faintly now. I looked up, And there he was. Richard. Standing at the end of the tunnel, his face calm, eyes full of sorrow. Where am I? I whispered. He didn't move. Between what was and what will be, he said softly. You wanted to bury me alone. But you came here to find me. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't want to bury you alone. They are children. They didn't come. They didn't care. He took a slow step closer. You think I wanted that, Helen? To be sent off into the dark with no one but you crying over my coffin. I trembled. You think I wanted it either? You think I didn't beg them to come? They chose their own lives over you. I was the only one who stayed. Richard sighed, lowering his head. You stayed because you were still angry, Helen. You couldn't let go. You kept your tears locked away, not for me, but for yourself. I shook my head fiercely. No. I took care of you when no one else would. I was there when you couldn't breathe, when you couldn't walk. Yes, he said softly. But did you love me when I was gone? Or did you just remember the pain? His words cut through me like glass. I fell to my knees sobbing. You don't understand. I tried to forgive you, I really did. But every time I looked at you, I saw the man who yelled, who broke things, who made our home so cold. He stepped closer, his form flickering in the light. And every time I looked at you, I saw the woman who stopped laughing, who stopped believing in me. We both failed each other, Helen. I looked up, my tears glistening in the faint glow. Then why are you doing this? Why scare the children? Why the messages, the threats? His expression darkened. I didn't write those words. I froze. What? He looked past me, toward the tunnel's shadowed walls. There's something else here. Something that feeds on regret. It took my voice when I tried to speak peace. It twisted my memory into warnings. The air grew colder. I turned and saw movement in the shadows. A dark figure crawling along the walls like smoke. Its eyes burned faintly red. My heart nearly stopped. What is that? I whispered. Richard's voice shook. It's what becomes of what we never forgive. The shadow slithered closer, its form shifting, whispering in dozens of voices at once. Our voices. Mine. Richard's. Even the children's. It hissed. You buried him alone. You left him cold. You all forgot. I stumbled backward, clutching the glowing locket. Stay away from me. Richard reached for me. Don't listen to it. It's the bitterness we left behind. It feeds on what's unfinished. The shadow lunged forward, wrapping around me like smoke. I screamed as icy pain flooded my chest. I could hear voices whispering in my ears, Mark, Emily, Lily, all crying, all calling my name. Then the locket in my hand burst open, shining with blinding light. The shadow hissed and pulled back. I looked down. The picture inside had changed again. Now it showed all of us, me, Richard, and our children, standing together, smiling. Richard. I shouted. What do I do? He raised his hand toward the locket. You forgive. The shadow shrieked, swirling faster around us. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. I forgive you, Richard, I whispered. For everything. For the pain, the anger, the nights I cried. I forgive it all. The air trembled. The tunnel's light grew brighter. Richard's form began to fade, but he was smiling now. And I forgive you, Helen, he said softly. You carried too much alone. But now, it's time to let go. The shadow screamed, then dissolved into thin air, leaving nothing but silence. I fell to the ground, exhausted, sobbing uncontrollably. The golden light from the locket grew brighter and brighter, until it filled everything around me. I closed my eyes. And when I opened them again, I was lying on the grass. Rain poured softly around me. I blinked, coughing, sitting up. The grave was closed again. The earth was still, like nothing had ever happened. Mom. I looked up and saw them, Emily and Mark, running toward me, muddy and wet but alive. They dropped to their knees beside me, holding me tightly. You fell in, Emily cried. We thought we lost you. I hugged them both, tears streaming down my face. It's over, I whispered. He's gone now. He's finally at peace. Mark looked at the grave. What happened down there, Mom? I smiled faintly, holding up the locket. The light inside it had faded, leaving only the photo of our family, unchanging still. Forgiveness, I said softly. That's what happened. The clouds began to part, and the first rays of sunrise broke through. The storm was over. But then, just as I stood to leave, something glinted at the edge of the grave. I bent down and saw it. A ring, half buried in the dirt. It was Richard's wedding ring. The one he was buried with. But engraved inside, now freshly cut, were words that hadn't been there before. It's not over. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying a faint whisper that made my heart stop. Helen. I turned sharply toward the voice, but no one was there. Only the sound of the wind. The ring glimmered faintly in my trembling hand. The morning sun had just begun to rise, yet a chill crept up my spine as though the grave itself had exhaled the cold breath of the night. The engraving, those 3 simple words, burned themselves into my mind. It's not over. For a long moment, none of us moved. Emily's voice broke the silence, trembling. Mom, how did that ring get there? You said he was buried with it, right? Mark frowned, his face pale. Did someone dig it up? I didn't answer. My fingers tightened around the ring, feeling the smooth metal, the weight of memory pressing against my skin. I remembered how Richard had slipped it onto my finger on our wedding day, how his hands had been warm and sure. And now here it was again, cold as the grave he lay in. I forced myself to smile at my children, though my lips quivered. Maybe it just came loose when the ground shifted. I said softly, even though I didn't believe it myself. Let's go home. Mark hesitated. Mom, we should tell someone. Maybe a caretaker, or the pastor. No, I interrupted quickly. Not yet. We left the graveyard in silence, the sound of our footsteps mixing with the whispering wind that seemed to follow us all the way to the car. I felt its presence even as we drove home. Something unseen, heavy watching. When we reached the house, everything looked normal. The curtains fluttered gently. The morning light painted soft patterns across the floor. But something felt off, an emptiness that hadn't been there before. As I stepped into the living room, I froze. The picture of our family that used to hang above the fireplace was gone. In its place was an old photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. It showed me and Richard, much younger, standing in front of the very same graveyard. His arm was around me, and we were smiling. But something, had drawn a faint, uneven circle around his face in dark ink. Mom! Emily whispered from behind me. Who did that? I don't know, I said, my voice barely a breath. Mark walked over and took the photo off the wall. This doesn't make sense. We don't even own this picture. He turned it around, and we all gasped. On the back, written in the same uneven handwriting that had appeared on the gravestone, were the words, "You shouldn't have forgiven me." Emily began to cry. Mom, what's happening? I'm scared. I pulled her close, whispering, It's okay, honey. It's over. He's gone. But even as I said it, a soft noise echoed through the house, 3 slow knocks from somewhere deep within. Mark's eyes widened. Did you hear that? We stood frozen, listening. Knock. 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 It came again, this time from upstairs, from our old bedroom. The room Richard and I had shared for more than 30 years. Stay here, I said, my voice firm though my hands were shaking. I started up the stairs, each step creaking louder than the last. The air grew colder with every breath, until I could see the faint mist of my own exhale. When I reached the top, the door to our bedroom was slightly open. A faint humming drifted out, a sound I recognized instantly. Richard's favorite song. I pushed the door open. The room was dim, curtains swaying as if someone had just passed by. The music came from the old record player in the corner, the same one that hadn't worked in years. The vinyl spun slowly, the needle dragging across it, releasing that haunting hum. My heart thudded painfully. Richard. I whispered. The humming stopped. And then his voice. Why did you leave me alone? I spun around. The room was empty, but the voice echoed as if the walls themselves were speaking. I didn't leave you, I said aloud, trembling. You left me. You left all of us. You buried me, but didn't let me rest, the voice replied softly. Tears filled my eyes. I forgave you. I let you go. What more do you want? For a moment, silence. Then, from the mirror on the dresser, fog began to spread across the glass, swirling until words appeared, written as if by invisible hands. If you forgave me, why do you still wear the ring? My breath caught. I looked down at my left hand. The wedding ring still wrapped around my finger, the gold dull from years of wear. I tried to pull it off, but it wouldn't budge. No. Y whisperat. No, no, no. The mirror flickered, and for just a second, I saw him standing behind me, pale, hollow-eyed, his mouth curved into a sorrowful smile. Until you let go, he whispered. I will never rest. The lights flickered violently. I stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the dresser. The room plunged into darkness, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Fast, uneven. Then, from downstairs, Emily screamed, Mom, the grave, it's in the yard. I bolted out of the room and rushed down the stairs. The front door was wide open, the cold morning wind howling through it. I ran outside barefoot, heart pounding. And there, in the middle of our front yard, was a mound of fresh soil, shaped exactly like a grave. Richard's gravestone stood at its head. Carved freshly into the stone, beneath his name, were new words. She buried me twice. Emily clung to me, crying uncontrollably. Mark stood frozen, his face white as chalk. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The earth beneath the mound began to tremble. Slowly, the soil started to crack open. A pale hand, thin-veined, familiar, broke through the dirt. And then another. I screamed. The hands gripped the edge of the grave, pulling upward, soil falling away in chunks. I could see the outline of his face beneath the mud, eyes closed, lips pale. Then slowly his eyes opened. They were not Richard's eyes anymore. The world around me went silent. The rain stopped, the wind froze, even the rustle of trees seemed to hold its breath. My eyes locked on those pale, lifeless eyes staring up from the cracked soil. Richard's eyes, but wrong. They weren't warm brown anymore. They shimmered in a ghostly blue light, hollow, glowing faintly like the moon reflected on water. His lips trembled, trying to form words as clumps of dirt fell from his mouth. Helen! Emily screamed and hid behind me. Mark shouted, Mom! Get away from there! But my legs wouldn't move. My body felt glued to the earth, my heart thundering so loud I could barely hear anything else. Richard's head rose from the dirt, his face pale, streaked with soil. He gasped for air that didn't seem to come. The smell of wet earth filled my nose as his hand stretched toward me. Help me, he croaked. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No. No, Richard, you're supposed to be gone. You were supposed to rest. Mark ran forward, grabbing a shovel from the garden. Mom, go inside. He yelled, swinging the shovel at the mound. But the moment it hit, the ground pulsed, like something alive had just been struck. The shovel flew out of his hands, landing several feet away. Then, from beneath the grave, a deep, low rumble echoed. The earth shuddered violently. Emily fell to her knees, crying hysterically. Please, make it stop. I looked at Richard's face again, and in that moment I saw it. The truth. That thing, it wasn't him. The glow in his eyes flickered, and his mouth twisted into a grin, cold, wide, unnatural. You think you forgave him, Helen? It hissed. You think love ends in the ground. I backed away slowly. You're not Richard. Its grin widened. But I am what you made him. Your bitterness gave me life. Your anger kept me breathing. Every tear, every regret, you fed me. The grave cracked wider. The air grew icy. I could see the grass around the mound withering, turning black. I fell to my knees, clutching the locket around my neck. Please, Richard, I whispered, hoping he could hear me wherever he was. If you're still in there, fight it. Please. For a brief second, the creature's face softened. Helen, it said weakly in his true voice this time. Let me go, please. And then it screamed, a bone-chilling, guttural cry that shook the very air. The ground erupted, tossing me and the children backward. The locket ripped from my neck, flying into the grave, where it landed beside him. The glow returned, brighter, fiercer, wrapping around the creature's body like fire. Mark pulled Emily to her feet. Mom, we have to run. But I couldn't move. Not yet. I crawled toward the grave, the wind howling around me. Take me instead, I cried. Just let them go. The creature turned its glowing eyes toward me. For a long, terrible moment everything stopped. Then slowly, it reached up and placed a muddy hand on its chest, right where the locket rested. The golden light flared once more, and I heard Richard's voice whisper softly, "Thank you." And then silence. The light faded. The ground stopped trembling. The grave was still again. No sign of the creature, no sign of the locket. Just dirt, wet grass, and quiet. I collapsed to the ground, shaking, crying so hard I could barely breathe. Mark and Emily ran to me, wrapping their arms around me. "He's gone," I whispered. "He's really gone this time." Emily nodded, tears soaking my dress. "Is it over, Mom?" I looked toward the grave. "Yes," I said, though my heart felt uncertain. "It's over." But as we turned to go back inside, the faintest whisper brushed past my ear, soft, almost tender. "Don't forget me." I froze, my breath catching. I turned, but there was nothing. Only the morning sun breaking through the clouds. I tried to smile, though a chill ran through me. "Goodbye, Richard," I whispered. Then we went inside, closing the door behind us. That night, for the first time in months, the house was quiet. No whispers. No knocking. No cold wind seeping through the walls. Just peace. I sat by the fireplace with a blanket around me while Mark and Emily slept upstairs. I stared at the flames, thinking about the years we had shared, both the love and the pain. Maybe Richard had found peace at last. Maybe I had too. Just as my eyes began to close, I heard something faint, a crackle from the fire. I looked up, and there, among the flames, a tiny glint caught my eye. Something gold. I leaned closer. My breath caught. The locket. It was lying in the fire, untouched by the flames, glowing faintly. And when I opened it, the picture had changed once again. It wasn't me, Richard, and the children anymore. It was just me, standing beside an open grave. And behind me, a hand reaching out of it. Before I could react, the lights flickered. The fire went out. Darkness filled the room. Then from the hallway, a soft, slow knock echoed 3 times. Knock. 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 I whispered through trembling lips. "Richard?" No answer. Only the quiet hum of the wind outside. But when I turned back toward the fireplace, I saw it. On the soot-dark wall above the ashes, a faint set of words written by an unseen hand. "I told you it's not over." The air grew cold. The shadows on the wall shifted. And I realized maybe it never would be. The sun rose slowly that morning, painting gold across the world that had almost stopped for me. I hadn't slept. My hands still trembled as I sat in the living room, staring at the cold, silent fireplace. The locket lay beside me, still warm, still glowing faintly. Emily came downstairs first, rubbing her eyes. "Mom," she whispered. "You didn't sleep?" I smiled weakly. "No. Just thinking." Mark followed, frowning when he saw the locket. "Mom, we should destroy that thing. Burn it. Throw it away. It's not normal." I shook my head. "No. That's not what he wants." Emily tilted her head. "Then what does he want?" I looked out the window toward the graveyard in the distance. The morning mist clung to the earth like a secret. "Peace," I said softly. "He just wants peace." We spent the morning in silence. The house felt different. Lighter somehow, though a shadow of fear still lingered behind every sound. Around noon, I made tea and sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees. That was when I saw it. A man standing by the old oak tree across the road, wearing a gray coat. I couldn't see his face, but the way he stood, the way his shoulders slumped, it was familiar. "Mom," Mark said behind me. "Who are you looking at?" I blinked, and the man was gone. I smiled faintly. No one. That evening, we decided to go back to the graveyard one last time. We carried flowers, white lilies, Richard's favorite. The path was muddy from last night's rain, but the air was calm, peaceful. When we reached his grave, the earth was still. The headstone gleamed softly in the fading sunlight. No new carvings. No movement. Just stillness. I knelt, placing the flowers gently before it. "You can rest now," I whispered. "And so can I." Mark and Emily stood quietly beside me, their faces solemn. We prayed together, silently, each of us in our own way. When we rose to leave, the wind brushed past us softly, like a sigh. It felt warm. And for the first time, I truly believed he was gone. We walked home, hand in hand. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at my desk and opened a blank page in my journal. I began to write, not about the haunting, or the fear, or the grave, but about forgiveness, about love that endures beyond the grave, and pain that only ends when we let it. And at the end, I wrote one final line. I buried my husband alone, but in the end he buried my anger too. I smiled, closed the book, and blew out the candle. As the room faded into darkness, I thought I heard his voice one last time, soft and peaceful. "Thank you, Helen." And then silence. Real silence. The kind that means everything broken has finally been mended. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of what hurt you. Some ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt hearts. And the moment you forgive, they finally rest. Forgiveness freed my soul. But what if some ghosts never leave? Would you forgive someone who came back from the grave just to remind you it's not over? I still wonder if I did the right thing. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and remember, one click to subscribe means you'll never miss the next story.